Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. And by Three Roll Estate Craft Rum Distillery, crafting premium rum from their own Louisiana sugarcane. Three Roll is cane to glass.
From Tula Tacos and Amigos in downtown Lafayette, we're out to lunch with Christian Mader, publisher and editor of The Current. It's business, Acadiana style.
Welcome to Out to Lunch. I'm Christian Mader. In 1515, Pope Leo X tried to cancel the Bible. Well, Gutenberg's Bible anyway, and it's hard to imagine now, but back then, printed books were considered a threat. Literacy among the wider population could undermine the influence of the church. And in all, Gutenberg produced about 180 copies of his Bible, and today, 280 characters on Twitter is how you change the world. So what room is there for the study of letters? And what about the original tweet, short fiction? My guest, Jim Lambert, spent a career in law before putting his shoulder into the wheel of the metaverse and starting to write short fiction himself. Jim took creative writing courses with the late, great Ernest Gaines at UL and published his first compilation of short stories, Sub Rosa, in 2021. He specializes in a kind of hidden history, finding nuggets of underdocumented history and spinning them into fictionalized narratives. Jim is also a spiritual mentor for inmates at Louisiana's Angola prison. Jim Lambert, welcome to Out to Lunch.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. Very excited to have this time in person out to lunch.
Well appointed. Speaking of second acts, adult enrollment has boomed at UL Lafayette, according to my next guest, Jordan Kellman, Dean of UL's College of Liberal Arts. A key component of that is the Complete LA program that gives discounted tuition to adults looking to finish their degrees. Those late bloomers are attending an institution rising in prominence. UL, as you may have heard, attained R1 status, recognizing it as a top research university. Dr. Kellman holds a PhD in the history of science and French history and has served as liberal arts dean since 2012. Jordan Kellman, welcome to Out to Lunch.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Christian.
So, Jim, I noticed you published your first book through Balboa Press, which is, as I understand it, kind of a self-publishing platform, kind of hybrid sort of thing, right, where you sign up with them and they kind of help you through the process. So once you get that hard copy in hand, though, right, I mean, how do you get out there and start to sell it?
Well, you send it to your friends. Facebook has helped. I've done a number of podcasts, radio interviews. My goal with the book was to do something creative. After many decades of kind of pragmatic thought, and then having the pleasure of studying under Ernest Gaines and having the aspiration to be a writer, particularly short stories. When I retired, it was now or never. Either you're going to do it, you're going to get an editor, you're going to do it right, you're going to get a proofreader and a publisher, and you're going to put this thing out. And it's been a lot of fun. Balboa is a fantastic company. And they arrange for everything. And it's kind of what I would call a high-end self-publishing. But they do the layouts, a super professional job, and a very reasonable price, I might add.
So, look, we're here to talk about you, but I am curious about that. I mean, I did a little bit of Googling about Balboa and kind of maybe what sets it apart. Because, I mean, self-publishing is a pretty big industry. It's getting out there. And it struck me that they do more than sort of these other services. Like, I even kind of wondered, should I call it self-publishing or not? Because it seemed like it did more than what I might do, just like take something and put it on Amazon in an ebook or something like that, which clearly this is a cut above that. I mean, how does it work?
Well, you call them, you talk to them, they tell you what they can do, and you make a decision on what you want. I mean, it is a kind of an a la carte type of situation, but for somebody who doesn't want to be involved in the mechanics of actually putting a book together, laying it out, I selected the font and everything, but I was very happy with how they laid everything out and arranged everything, and then of course put it on all the platforms. I didn't want to do that. I want to write and talk about writing, and so for somebody like me who is willing to spend a modest amount of money, it was a very good way to put a book out there.
Jordan, I studied philosophy in college, and the trope back then was, well, you can always be a lawyer. And I guess the idea was that, the value in a liberal arts degree, right? This is like 2006 when I graduated college, it would somehow apply to some career, right? And certainly universities have become more and more streamlined in preparing us to work, right? Maybe not so much get into study. So I guess just in a nutshell, I know it's a big question. I mean, how does a liberal arts degree fit into that today? Are we still kind of telling people, hey, this is a great interdisciplinary thing and you can apply it to different degrees? Or are we trying to, urge people to study philosophy and become philosophers or podcast hosts?
That is a great question, Christian, and my answer would be both. So to your specific question and your own degree, congratulations on studying philosophy. It's a great choice. When we study nationally the lifetime earnings of college graduates, liberal arts graduates actually show up very much in a strong place near the center of the curve. And interestingly enough, philosophy is at the very top of the liberal arts. So over a lifetime, this was a study from 2 or 3 years ago, over a lifetime, the average income of a philosophy graduate is $104,000 a year, which is almost at the top of the entire university hierarchy. So
nobody
basically,
called me about this, by the way, because my salary does not factor into that. Okay, yeah, sorry.
Basically, you have to be an aeronautical engineer to earn more over a lifetime than somebody who holds a philosophy degree. Why is that? Because philosophy programs teach people how to think. They teach people how to think very rigorously and carefully. And those are extremely valuable skills in the workplace. So being able to analyze difficult problems and understand complex human situations and complex cognitive situations are extremely valuable skills no matter what field or discipline you go into. And that applies to some extent to all of the liberal arts majors. And we find our job placement rates very competitive. But again, the biggest payoff comes in lifetime average earnings, because people who go into professions with those particular skills tend to rise. Who gets promoted? The people who understand how to take a complex situation with a lot of unknowns and a lot of human factors and negotiate it carefully, respectfully, ambitiously, with an eye on the goal and the ability to bring people into the solution, to the discussion, and to persuade them of the value of a solution. These are all skills that are incredibly valuable in almost any career that people have out there, and we see that confirmed in the numbers. Now, I said both. So it's also true that in the liberal arts, we are now also focusing, in addition to teaching these basic skills that we've always taught, and by the way, which have made a liberal arts degree the most valuable and certain path to social mobility that the world has ever found over centuries. But in addition to those that we've always done, we're also introducing lots of much more mundane kinds of workforce training that are extremely important too, and where we have lots of students who are looking to get specific workforce and professional skills. And we have lots of disciplines that are teaching those too, more than ever. Criminal justice is a good example.
Sure.
Psychology, speech pathology. These are definitely fields that are training people for specific careers.
Jim, this raises a very important question to me. Jim, what did you study in college?
I was a speech communication major as undergraduate, and I'll never forget talking with one of, when I was at LSU, I talked to one of the graduate students, and he was going back to teach at some college, and I said, "What are you going to make?" Well, he told me, and I'm like, "Oh my God, I need to go to law school." I really, I had no idea. I looked at my professor, who I admired so much, and I thought, well, maybe he can, he teaches in the morning and he plays tennis in the afternoon. It must be a fun job to be, in the teaching at a university. And I had no idea of the rigor and the demands. and sadly, at least on an entry level, the salary. And so I decided to go to law school, and it was somewhat a practical thing, like Jordan says. I wanted something specific. I wanted something that I could have a day job. In America, if you're an artist, you better have a day job too. If you're, whether it's you're a musician or a visual artist or a writer, America sadly is about money. I mean, I hate to say it, and but fundamentally we are a capitalist culture, and so I had a day job for 40 years, and now I can be a creative person.
Yeah. Is it fair to say, like, I mean, you said earlier that the book, right, and your turn to fiction was more about sort of satisfying creative pursuit, maybe
Yes.
less so than an economic pursuit, right?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. It's not an economic pursuit at all. I mean, it is strictly, I wanted to write some stories, particularly about my home, section of the state, and the soul of Southern culture. I love Southern Gothic. I love so many. I mean, Ernie Gaines's short story collection, Bloodlines, one of the finest in American literature, and so there were a lot of aspirational people in my life that I looked at, and I said, I'd like to do something like that. I know I'm not going to liken myself to these greats, but I just wanted to put it out there, and it's been very well received. I got a very good review in Kirkus Literary Reviews, which is a really legit agency, and a number of my friends at UL, even though they're my friends, they're literary professors, and they tell me it was good. So it was something I wanted to do simply for the act of creating.
Sure. So, Gwen, congratulations on the good reviews. And Jordan, one thing I hear in Jim's story, right, is something he sort of comes back to this discipline later in life, and it's sort of an act of personal enrichment, right? And I'm thinking about these folks that are kind of coming back to school and sort of to complete, right? These are not folks that are coming back to school because they're seeing something missing in their lives and they're trying to fill a hole, right? Like, this is more, I would presume, people who are trying to finish a degree because it would make their lives more gainful, right? I mean, or do I have it wrong?
Actually, I think you get both, and you definitely get a lot of people in this population who want to do it to confirm something that they started and to be able to say that they finished it, and because it was something that they loved and had to pull away from for various practical reasons, and want to come back. Actually, one of the primary reasons that we find people, adults in this situation with some college and no degree and not having returned to college, is that they came to a certain point in their careers where they realized it wouldn't make any difference. They pursued opportunities and they find themselves in a gainful profession in the workplace, and they didn't need to go back and get a degree. So many people there are doing it for personal reasons, although certainly plenty of them see it as a career boosting or a salary boosting opportunity.
Yeah, I think often I had a number of friends that have gone on and received doctorates, and one friend of mine who was teaching in Turkey for a while during the pandemic, and he came home and he was like struggling to break into American academia, which is where he wanted to be because he's from the U.S., right? Didn't want to stay in Turkey forever, and he was like, screw it, I'm going to learn how to code, right? And that's what he did, and I guess it has me curious. I mean, I think a lot of times we have this impression that we go to college, we study something in the liberal arts, perhaps. I don't mean to pick on liberal arts specifically, but anything that might lead you on an academic career path. I mean, so what kind of guidance does the university sort of offer in a person who's trying to figure out, like, am I studying philosophy because I want to be a philosopher and teach philosophy and study philosophy, or am I doing this because I want to enter the workforce? I mean, how do you help people make those decisions? Even at 21 years old, that can seem pretty terrifying.
I guess you could see it as terrifying, but we see it in a very positive light. I mean, these are decisions that offer nothing but potential. And I think many of our students, including some of the returning adult students, are there because they love what they do. They love the things that they're studying. They're interested in it. and they assume that it will lead to something positive, and often it does. Always it does. Often it leads to something, extremely remunerative. Some of the first returning adult students that we had in the state when this program started were people at the end of their lives. We had people returning to get a degree who were 80, 85 years old, and sometimes, they were first-generation college students. Wow. And this was a big deal in their lives and in their families. You have the whole family there at graduation crying as this person walks across the stage. Mm-hmm. This is not about money in every case, though certainly it can be important.
You're listening to Out to Lunch. I'm Christian Mader. I'm talking with UL's Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, Dr. Jordan Kellman, and Jim Lambert, author of the short fiction collection Sub Rosa. Jim, not to pick on your own college career, you said you studied speech and communications. Did your parents say at this time, what are you going to do with that? I just feel like that may be the thing that looms over these conversations even today. Well, you're going to go and study what? Well, how are you going to make money doing that? Did your parents give you that whole?
No, my parents they grew up in the Depression, World War II. They were thrilled just to have someone go to college. Huh. You see, that was at a time where many of my parents' generation maybe went to the college on the GI Bill or whatever, things like that. So they were just thrilled that I was in speech and doing well. I was an old debater in high school and college. The first college I went to, I had a debate scholarship there. I actually went to a little religious college, Louisiana College. It was a Baptist school, and mainly because they gave me a full ride scholarship. And back in those times, you could go to college, get a few scholarships, work, and not incur giant student debt, which I wanted to avoid at all costs, even back then. And so very, very blessed. When I went to law school, my law school tuition was $255 a semester. That is incredible support by the state of Louisiana, and it was only because of that I was able to attain a degree like this. And so I kind of owe my whole life to that support of our culture and our government, that gave to students during that time.
Jim, one of the amazing things about the American university experience is that it's really set up to guide a young person through figuring out what they want to do with their lives, which is often a process that takes people into their early 20s and sometimes later. I think there's a myth out there that people make a decision about what they're going to do and they pick that major and that's it. That's the major they're training for and that's the career that they're training for. That's actually rarely true, and it's getting less and less true now. Our young people today are going to cycle through, on average, by the latest study, 13 different jobs, completely different jobs through the course of their lives. Wow. So the old model of sort of getting the solid job straight out of college and retiring out of that same job at the end of your life is almost never the case today. So every summer I ask parents at the orientations, how many of them knew when they were 17 or 18 what they were going to be when they grew up, and that's actually turned out to be true. And in a room full of parents, there's usually about 1 out of 20 who will raise their hand and say, I knew it, I majored in it, I got the career in it, I'm in it, and that's it. And that's wonderful. That's a great outcome. But most people don't actually follow a linear path like that. And we're extremely lucky in the United States to have this system that's really set up that way to give young people an opportunity to explore and find out what their strengths are and find out what really resonates deeply with them. And we have, because of that, a much, much higher rate of people getting into careers that they love, careers that fit them, that they're good at. So Jim's a perfect example of all of this. But there's millions of such examples. But
it strikes me there's a bit of a contradiction here too, though, right? And maybe this is not quite in the the university level, but I think of all of these, secondary school type programs where they're already kind of saying, look, you could choose a path in STEM today, right? And here's your education. You can go and get, we're going to prepare you to be a pre-med student at like 15. And because I'm one of those people that you're describing, right? Like I got my major in philosophy, my minor was in journalism, and I went as far away from journalism I could for about a decade before I landed back in it. But it still feels like in a lot of ways we have a system that basically tries to tell you, well, you got to pick something now or get off the boat. I mean, maybe, look, I've been out of college for about 15 years. So, I mean, that could be a bit of me not understanding what's happening. But do we not see other signals in the world that aren't telling people, hey, you need to figure this out now or you're going to be left on the street?
Well, one thing I've been wanting to ask Jordan to comment on, because Jordan, and I'm told this by your good friend Dennis Vitrella, he tells me all about your interesting background, but Jordan was, I believe, a French literature, French history graduate student, and you studied in Paris. I think he was such an exceptional student. He was allowed to enroll in multiple universities in Paris, if I'm not mistaken. But the French system, I've been told long ago, that asked students to decide when they're 15 or 14, which way are you going to go? Are you going to go the vocational route? Or are you going to go the academic route? Am I right?
You are correct.
So would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, and France is not exceptional in that sense. The assumption through most of the industrialized world is that people will choose at a much younger age than we would assume. And it depends. I mean, it's not a monolith anywhere, and you certainly have people changing tracks at ages beyond that. But the system is certainly set up in France to take some people and start putting them on a specific track starting around the age of 14. And I actually know that because I happened to go to school in France for a year when I was 14. Wow. And I saw some of my peers, were kids. This is middle school. Being tracked. Now, actually, since then, we've developed more of a system of starting to do that in the States than we had at the time, because we have, to some extent, bought into the value of this. And it certainly does have a certain value for some people. So now in high schools, we have a much more developed track system with AP courses and dual enrollment courses and separate math courses and science courses for people who are thinking about pursuing medical degrees or science careers, that kind of thing. And that certainly serves a purpose. But I really, really hope that we don't give up the flexibility that we do have built into our university system in this country, because, and you see it in France, and any French person will tell you, and you see it in a lot of other countries too, you have lots and lots of people who are stuck in careers in those countries that they aren't really happy about as adults. It's something that made sense at a certain point in their lives, and once they got on that track, it was very difficult to get off, and they can be stuck counting down the years until it's over. And I think we take for granted in the United States that it's all sort of a big smorgasbord and you can always reinvent yourself. It's part of our national myth, You can reinvent yourself at almost any point in life. And that serves us very, very well in a lot of practical ways.
Jim, you come to your career now in writing with the ability to be flexible. You could do anything you want. Why short fiction?
I fell in love with short fiction, taking courses under Ernest Gaines, and then ran across this writer, Richard Ford, who's both a novelist and short story writer, and then he led me to Raymond Carver. And I just fell in love with the whole idea of, I think short fiction should be a dominant literary genre today because of the time demands on people. You can finish a short story in 45 minutes and go to sleep at night, whereas novels, which of course are the dominant literary form, they're great. But I don't know, I've always been drawn to this idea of maybe a tightly crafted story that can wrap up in 15 or 20 pages. I've also, as you mentioned, drawn to tell the story of our land that's not taught in schools. The history of racial violence, for example, that occurred in my home area of central Louisiana that I only found out as an adult, that were really shocking things that weren't in the history books that are now acknowledged, but they were hidden. And I used fiction to kind of bring them to life. And other stories that around our state that appear in my collection, maybe not of that politically charged variety, but they are things that might go unsaid if they weren't told in a literary way. So, I do love the genre of short stories, and again, I hope that people will enjoy reading the ones I put out.
Yeah. So, I guess the theme here in some ways is we're always just kind of on journeys of self-discovery and kind of looking for our own hidden histories to fictionalize in one way, shape, or form. Dr. Kellman, Jordan, and Jim, thanks for joining me today on Out to Lunch.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Christian.
My guests on Out to Lunch Acadiana have been author Jim Lambert and Jordan Kellman, Dean of the UL College of Liberal Arts. We edited this conversation to fit into our time slot here on KRVS. And you can hear our unedited conversation and find out more about Jim and Jordan by listening to the Out to Lunch Acadiana podcast. And you can find and subscribe to that podcast on your podcast app and on our website, itsacadiana.com. If you want to know what we all look like, you can find photos from this show on itsacadiana.com and on our social media. These photos were taken by Astor Morgan, and you can find more of Astor's photos at astormorgan.com. Out to Lunch is a production of INO Broadcasting for itsacadiana.com and KRBS 88.7 FM. The producer of our show is Grant Boris. Our technical producer is Eric Merle. Today's show was engineered by Kieran McIntosh, and our associate producer is Molly Richard. Our researcher is Leah Erdialis, and I'm Christian Mader. I'm editor of the Current Lafayette's nonprofit news outlet. For stories deeper than the headlines, head over to thecurrentla.com and sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you here again next time for more business and conversation on Out to Lunch Acadiana. Bye-bye.
Out to Lunch Acadiana is recorded live over lunch at Tula Tacos and Amigos. Tula Tacos and Amigos offers street-style tacos, margaritas, and an open-air courtyard on Jefferson Street in the heart of downtown Lafayette. Major support for Out to Lunch is provided by the law firm of Jones Walker, established in 1937 with over 375 attorneys in offices throughout the U.S., providing a comprehensive range of services to a local, national, and international client base. JonesWalker.com. Mitchell Foreman wrote and performs all the music on Out to Lunch. You can hear Mitchell's music anywhere great jazz is sold or streamed, and at mitchellforeman.com.